Well, hello, everybody. This is Bob Brooks, host of the Prudent Money Radio Show. Today, we start off the program talking about some very concerning numbers that talk about what's really going on in the student loan situation in this country right now. I don't think that people realize how bad these numbers are. And John Apollo will be on the program on Wednesday. I just wanted to put it out there, some of the numbers we're looking at. So, to get you ready for that program on Wednesday. So we talk about that. We talk about target date funds and why I don't really care for them, and maybe a better way to achieve the same strategy on your own. If you got a question for me, go to the website, www.prudentmoney.com. I can help you with anything financially related or stewardship related if you got a question on that as well. That's all at the website, prudentmoney.com. Keep the faith. Well, hello, everybody. This is Bob Brooks, host of the Prudent Money Radio Show. Today, we start off the program talking about some very concerning numbers that talk about what's really going on in the student loan situation in this country right now. I don't think that people realize how bad these numbers are. And John Apollo will be on the program on Wednesday. I just wanted to put it out there, some of the numbers we're looking at. So, to get you ready for that program on Wednesday. So we talk about that. We talk about target date funds and why I don't really care for them, and maybe a better way to achieve the same strategy on your own. If you got a question for me, go to the website, www.prudentmoney.com. I can help you with anything financially related or stewardship related if you got a question on that as well. That's all at the website, prudentmoney.com. Keep the faith. Well, student loan debt could not look any worse than it does right now. Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Good afternoon and welcome to the Prudent Money Radio Show. I'm your host, Bob Brooks. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Well, if you got a question for me, please go to the website at www.prudentmoney.com. Go to the top of the page, and there is a Ask Prudent Money link. Just click through, and we'll get you taken care of. It's very simple to do. Just send an email in, and we'll get your question answered. We want to be a resource for you and be there to help you with those hard questions. Anything we can do to help, prudentmoney.com. Typically, every month I have John Apollo on the program. John is considered one of the foremost experts on student college administration and student loan debt, that type of thing. And I want to just kind of as a summary, talk a little bit about what's going on right now, because the numbers that describe what's happening with student loan debt are pretty scary numbers. And this is the one thing we talked a lot about when it was happening, when they would get these periods of time. I mean, they went like 3 years during COVID, something like that, where they could defer their payments. And then we had another year of kind of building up to the point to where if you missed a payment, you're not going to get penalized for it. Anyway, it ended up being something like 4 or 5 years. And it was very simple to come to the conclusion that it's probably a habit that the vast majority of student loan borrowers have lost as far as paying back this money. So they're not used to it, so they go spend it elsewhere, they get other obligations, and now they don't have money to pay everything they need to, and they've got a problem. You could see that coming a mile away. And it brings up a really interesting question that I want to talk to John about. He's going to be in on Wednesday. I really look forward to this because I think these are some important questions to answer. So as of let's just look at the numbers. As of early 2025, approximately 43 million Americans hold federal student loan debt totaling around $1.77 trillion. That is just absolutely crazy. That's, $1 trillion is a million millions. As let's see, this includes both active borrowers and those in various stages of repayment or default. The breakdown of federal student loan borrowers are in school 5.9 million borrowers, people who are on grace period 1.1 million borrowers, and 25.4 million borrowers in repayment. Now, more than 5 million borrowers are currently in default. So if these statistics are correct, and I vetted them two different ways, then that 5 million is part of the 25 million borrowers, and 5 million of them are in default, and they're forecasting that could swell to roughly 10 million borrowers, could double within just a few months, according to the Trump administration. So here comes the question that I have, and I'm very conservative as far as my political values go, and so just keep that in mind as I post this question. So the question is, should politicians take some of the blame of the condition of the system and help students get out of debt versus this go straight for the throat approach, no grace, they're going to garnish wages, and they're going to withhold benefits, and they're going to do everything they can to make it so painful that you'll have to figure out a way to pay it. And so the way that I look at this is that from Biden's standpoint, he went far way to the other side of the spectrum, being too giving and maybe too socialistic, if that's a word, about how they went through the process, because he really set them up to fail. Now listen, I realize there is a responsibility here. If you borrow the money, you got to pay it back. But politicians they went extreme to the other side, or extreme to the same side as Biden, and many, many years ago set up this program to where you could borrow 100% of your college experience, and then some. Now, do you think that that's a good idea? And so it comes down to the question. Another question is the politicians, should they protect us from ourselves? They do in a lot of other ways. So it's just something that, versus the Trump administration is going way over to the other side, and they're going for the throat. They're going for, wage garnishment, no excuses, no help. It's just, like I said, they're going to take the tough way out. And so I believe that the answer to that question is somewhere in the middle. I don't believe in forgiving student loan debt by any stretch, but I do believe that they could do things that could make this situation a lot easier to juggle everything they're juggling and pay back the student loan debts. So we'll be talking about that on Wednesday, and we'll be talking about a very tough situation. If you are facing that situation, make sure you listen on the podcast that's posted after every program. And John also has a great website that mycollegecorner.com that is there to help with if you have any questions as far as your situation with student loan debt. Hey, this is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thought I'd break out the U.S. debt clock. We haven't looked at that in a while. The usdebtclock.org, not it's just usdebtclock.org. And basically what it does, it supposedly, up to the minute, shows the increasing costs of what it takes to run this country. And it's only appropriate that it would be centered around debt because that's the problem. So let's look at, we talked about credit card debt was 1.7, no, excuse me, not credit card debt. We talked about debt that was student loan debt, $1.7 trillion. Of course, we can't talk about debt unless we mention credit card debt over $1.3 trillion. It wasn't that long ago that it was under $1 trillion, but now it's up over $1.3 trillion. So the U.S. national debt, are you ready for this one, is $36.8 trillion. And I remember reading these numbers back years ago when it was below 10 trillion. But of course, it's just gotten massive. And what I don't understand is you've got politicians who are trying to reduce spending and wasteful spending and that kind of thing, but yet they want to expand the U.S., we'll call it the credit limit, by removing the credit limit. So that means that politicians will be able to spend whatever they want to spend, and there's no credit ceiling, debt ceiling to worry about. I don't think that's a good idea, but nobody asked me. So the two largest budget items that the Trump administration may about to be in a situation where they're going to tinker with this a little bit. If they surely they'll catch a lot of flack for this. The Medicare, Medicaid, $1.6 trillion. Social Security, $1.5 trillion. Then the interest on debt. So far this year, we've paid a little over $1 trillion worth of interest. U.S. federal tax revenue is $5.1 trillion. And let's see, I don't see the complement to that number. But anyway, you get the point. I mean, it's completely out of control, and they have unfunded debt and interest, meaning this is money that they are on the hook for, but it's many, many years out. Unfunded debt is $103 trillion. Can you even get your wrapped around that? U.S. total debt, $103.5 trillion. It's mind-boggling. And, that is what the problem is, and that's what we face. So, a little sobering statistics there. This is Bob Brooks. We are up against a break. Stick around, and I'll be right back. Hi, my name is Bob Brooks, host of the Prudent Money Radio Show. So let me ask you a question. Do you know your numbers? Now, which numbers are those? They are your retirement numbers. That set of numbers is the single most important planning numbers you can know. Yet the majority of Americans don't even know them. Prudent Money Financial Services, sponsor of the Prudent Money Radio Show, specializes in figuring out those numbers and creating a game plan to make sure you're on the right track. Listen to the Prudent Money Radio Show weekdays at 3 p.m. on Bible School Radio 91.3.
Hi, I'm Jill Taylor, inviting you to join me each Saturday morning at 11 o'clock for Choose Life Radio. You'll hear people from across America sharing their stories of faith, forgiveness, redemption, and restoration. Choose Life Radio will encourage you to fully appreciate the gift of life. You may also find help for you or a friend in need. So please join me Saturday mornings at 11 o'clock right here on Bible School Radio 91.3.
Dynamic, practical, life-changing.
There's no point in going to church and not letting the Christ who gave birth to the church on the day of Pentecost change your life.
Join us each day as Pastor Paul Shepherd applies the timeless truth of Scripture to everyday life. It's Destined for Victory on this great station.
Weekday afternoons at 3:30 here on Bible School Radio, KDKR.
Welcome back. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Hey, if you get a chance, go to the website, www.prudentmoney.com, and send a question in, and I will get that question answered. That's all at the website, www.prudentmoney.com. You know, it's funny how a downturn in the market, one of two things happen. Either people start looking at their statements and getting really involved, or they get to a point where they go, I don't want to look at it, and I'll just stick it in a drawer and I'll look at it 5 years from now. Surely it'll be better. I know that you do this. I talk to people who do this. So one, as they're trying to figure out what they're going to do to not just be in a buy and hold strategy, they start reading about target date funds. And this is something that's somewhat of a staple in 401k plans now. I have real mixed emotions about these funds, but let me tell you what they do. Target date funds, they target in on a particular date of retirement. So if you are going to, I was about to say graduate, if you're going to retire in say 2030, then you would put your money in a 2030 target date fund. What that's supposed to do, that puts you on what they call a glide path, that as the years get closer to 2030, then your risk starts to lower. That, in theory, is what's supposed to happen. And my conflict comes down to is that I prefer someone using a strategy versus buy and hold. I think as you get closer to retirement, or you get closer to funding a college education or whatever it might be, that you really back off a risk, and you especially back off a risk if you've got a surplus or you've done really well, and there's just not anything that you want to jeopardize when you're talking about big life events such as a kid going to college or your retirement dreams. Of course, this now is only about retirement. Not that I was using that as an example for college. In fact, there may be some target date type stuff set up for 529 plans. Who knows? But the target date fund, in fact, I saw a commercial on Fidelity, and this is just not what I like to see represent any strategy of investing. There was an interviewer that worked for Fidelity. The commercial sets up, they're sitting in a living room, and the husband and wife are going to get interviewed by this guy. And so the guy goes, "Can you tell me a little bit about your retirement fund?" And he says, "Well, supposedly it's some kind of fund. I don't know a whole lot about it, but they reduce risk as you get closer to retirement." And his wife didn't know much about it, and so the whole idea of the commercial was to say, "Hey, we got you covered. All you have to do is put money into these Fidelity target date funds, and we'll let us do the heavy lifting, and you just do what you have to do to get ready for retirement." I think it's a very risky message to send that that this is just an invest it and leave it alone and not worry about it. But here it is a strategy, and I like a strategy better than no strategy at all. The thing I don't like about it is that you're in a situation where you are under the impression that this thing's going to get a lot more conservative. And all you have to do is look up the returns back on, and I'll give you an example. I may be a little bit off on these numbers, but you'll get the idea. So if you were in a 2007 or 2008 target date fund, and the financial crisis hit, stock market lost over 50%, and you're looking at your what was supposed to be, I mean, it's 2008, the actual year, and you were supposed to retire in 2008, and you have your money invested in the 2008 fund. I mean, you're doing everything you're supposed to do, but yet in the year of 2008, you lost negative 10.8%, something like that. And the way that I look at it is Fidelity was their money managers were taking some kind of risk that they didn't realize they were taking, and they weren't doing anything to fix it. I mean, a 2008 fund in the year 2008, and that's the year you're supposed to retire, there's absolutely no reason why there should be a loss there if they're being true to form. And then if you look at, I've also looked at other allocations that they're supposed to be starting to get conservative with the money on the glide path, and they're still taking a lot of risk. And they look at diversification from the standpoint of international stocks bring in diversification. Well, true diversification is if one side goes up, the other goes down, or they kind of cushion the blow a little bit. A stock is a stock is a stock. And you've got to, I believe, and that's just my opinion, is that if you have international stocks, you need to treat them just as stocks. They all kind of go into one category as opposed to going into international stocks, and that being the category. So in my opinion, it's not something that you just leave and let go. And you're starting to see a lot of criticism of these funds and but here's the thing. The people in the company who are in charge of the 401k plan, they are doing everything possible to not create, well, they say they're doing everything possible not to create risk, but they don't want to increase liability on themselves because of the way that the way that the 401k is structured and what's available. And the irony is they're just using these target date funds, they're increasing their own liability. Hope that made sense. But I'm not a real big, like I said, I'm not a big fan of target date funds. I would rather see you take a bond, and there's people who won't agree with this, I get it, a bond fund index, a short-term bond type of a fund, and a stock fund, and just adjust the percentages accordingly. So maybe you want 50-50, so you put 50 in stock funds, and you put 50 in, and this is a very basic way to look at it, and then you put 50% in bond funds, or you put 50% in short-term bond funds. Short-term bond funds have worked so much better than long-term or medium-term bond funds. Bonds have had a really tough time, and I still believe that there's going to come a point where they're going to be a great investment. Just not a risk that I would take today. There's still quite a few problems with it. But as far as that goes, though, there's if you go to YouTube, search Prudent Money videos, and I have an entire video on how to allocate money between bonds and stocks, and several other videos about 401k plans and how you make them more effective and how do you invest in there. Real quick question that did come in. Retirement is within my grasp. I'm 57. My 401k is dropping, and I'm feeling anxious about a recession. What can I do? I find when talking to people that they're allowing the emotional aspect of investing and losing money and gaining money and whatever's going on, it gets a little bit dramatic. So the first question I would have for this individual is, what does my 401k is dropping actually mean? Because or you could use the word cratering, or you could use the word declining. What does a drop feel like or look like? So, maybe they say, well, it dropped 10% in 3 months. Well, as I've always said, you should be able to absorb a 10% hit anytime as a stock market investor. I would even suggest you could take that to 20%. It's just whether it goes into a bear market or it bounces back. That's the key right there. But what do you think that has happened? And that's very important question to answer. And then I ask them what they made the prior 2 years. Well, it was great. We've had great returns. And then you take those 2 years, you average them with the third year, and that's your average return for 3 years. But I think it's important to get an idea of what risk is and what it looks like and how you feel about it, and get allocated for risk accordingly. Especially if you're that, retirement is within my grasp. Is that 5 years, 10 years, 2 years, 1 year? And get a clarity to what it is that is troubling you and what it is that you feel is risky about you and making you anxious, and handling it that way. Hey, this is Bob Brooks. You've been listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. If you got a question for me, go to the website, www.prudentmoney.com, and send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time, keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.